Morning, I'm Chris from Hands on Health UK. Welcome to our podcast on sleep and fatigue. Over the last 50 years, the amount of sleep people get is approximately 2 hours less per night. The link between a lack of sleep and weight gain is getting stronger. With obesity being one of the biggest public health crises facing the UK today, should we be paying more attention to our sleep? So how have you been sleeping lately? Are you getting enough sleep? If not, do you know why? Is stress making it hard to drop off? Are you drinking a lot of caffeinated beverages during the day? Is your use of technology, such as looking at your phone in bed, not helping? Or does sleep simply get knocked down the list of priorities in your busy schedule? Helping us to find out more about sleep and fatigue, we have with us two experts. We'll also hear about some useful hints and tips which can help us if we do find ourselves struggling with fatigue. So without further ado, let's go! First, we popped out into the street to ask members of the public about their sleep patterns.
How much sleep do you normally get a night, typically?
About 5-6 hours?
Is that enough?
No, definitely not.
Never enough?
No.
And what's the reason that you get 5-6 and that's not enough?
I just can't sleep. I don't know.
So it's getting to sleep is the issue?
Yeah.
And do you find that you're watching TV or using technology right up to bedtime?
I don't, but then when I get bored of not sleeping, then I do. If that makes sense.
Right. So your technique if you can't sleep is to get back on your phone?
Yeah.
Do you think that's wise?
No.
It's turned into telling you off now, hasn't it? Do you have any other sort of things that you...
I take codeine to help me sleep.
Okay. In total, every night, typically, how much sleep do you get?
Anywhere between 3 and 6.
3 and 6, so your maximum is 6?
Yeah.
And you find that's enough?
Most of the time, no.
You feel generally fatigued?
Yeah.
Do you know any of the reason for that?
Yeah, overthinking, insomnia, part of it.
How many hours typically do you sleep a night?
A night, probably 7 hours.
And is that enough for you? Do you feel tired? Are you quite refreshed?
Usually enough.
Do you know what your secret is? Because a lot of people these days do feel tired. So what is it that you're doing right?
Probably you try and relax before you go to bed. Either make sure you're not worrying about anything too much.
So, we only asked a handful of people about their sleep, but what we did find out is that almost everyone we spoke to said they felt they weren't getting enough. So what's going on? We're going to get a bit meta now. We're going to speak to Richard Nichols, a motivational speaker and psychologist. He's done a podcast about sleep and fatigue, so we're going to talk to him about his podcast in our podcast. Richard is regularly in the top 10 UK podcast charts, so you might have heard of him, and he's currently writing a book about happiness. Richard, it's great to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So Richard, what can you tell us about sleep?
Well, one of the biggest embarrassments really of the 21st century medical world is that we don't really understand what sleep is. We just know that we need it, and that's all. We know that it consolidates learning in the brain. People make the mistake of thinking that the harder they work at something and the less sleep they get as they stop up later working hard, that they're going to achieve more. Actually, research shows it's the opposite way around. What's better is that you get good quality sleep. That whilst you sleep, the things you were doing that day, the new things you were learning, or just plain old consolidating your day, our brain is consolidating memory, making ourselves more efficient.
Okay, so what you're saying is work smarter, not harder. Great. Do you think there's anything that employers and managers could do to help?
I think managers can often make the mistake of thinking that the more work that their staff does, the more productive they're going to be. And so lots of managers will be sending emails around at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Anybody who wants to be conscientious, that wants to show their manager that they do care, they're going to want to reply to that. And actually, both the manager and their staff need to recognise that there has to be a cut-off point. That if you're going to be going to bed at 11 o'clock, once it gets to 10 o'clock, you shouldn't be looking at any devices and shouldn't really be thinking about work. Whatever you're thinking about just before you go to bed, it is going to play on your mind. And it is going to keep those worries rattling around in your head. Far better to create a sleep routine that says, this is what time I go to bed, and the hour beforehand, this is how I wind myself down.
So do you think as a nation, our attitude towards sleep has changed?
Our attitude towards sleep over the last few hundred years has changed completely. You go back a few hundred years, and sleep was a gift. It was a real pleasure. Everybody wrote in books and talked about the benefits of going to sleep and how important it was. Something happened during maybe the Industrial Revolution, but certainly there was a period in our recent past where sleep became a waste of time. It gets in the way of making money. It gets in the way of work, and work is more important than sleep, so less sleep. See what you can do to live on less sleep. And that's begun to become normalised as well, I think, really. How to get by on as little sleep as possible. And that's not right. That's not good for our brains. It's not good for our bodies. It's not good it's not good for production. We are not a productive nation if we are not sleeping well.
So what do you know about the various links between sleep and your overall health and well-being?
One of the interesting things to come out of a lot of sleep research is the benefits to your diet. We know that just half an hour less sleep per night will mean you're encouraged to eat probably around 120 to 130 extra calories the following day, just from half an hour less sleep. Also, rather bizarrely, when we get the right level of sleep, we produce a chemical called leptin, which makes us feel satisfied. If we're not sleeping, we're underproducing this hormone leptin, so we won't feel satisfied with stuff. We'll eat something and it won't satisfy us as much as it should. And with everything in life, we just won't get as much pleasure from it because we don't have this chemical leptin. Instead, what we do have is its ugly sister, which is ghrelin. Ghrelin is this hormone that we overproduce if we haven't had enough sleep, and that ghrelin will make us feel hungry when we're not. So there's lots and lots of benefits of getting a good night's sleep.
I've heard that one key cause of poor sleep can be anxiety, which in turn can lead to persistent fatigue. Do you have any helpful hints and tips for those of us who struggle with anxiety?
If you've got a lot of worries and you find that genuinely, I need to think about these things, they're genuinely important, then before you get into bed, if you know that this is the sort of thing you're going to think about, make a note of what those things are. Write them down. Move them from your head onto a notepad. You've moved them from your mind. It's a silly little exercise, but makes such a big difference when you can see I moved it from my thoughts to that piece of paper. I don't need to think about this anymore. In fact, if somebody is prone to worry, it's a very good idea to set up a particular time of day where you can worry. So you can give yourself permission to think about those things that bother you, but to recognise that there's a time and a place for it, and the bed is not the right time or place for it. If you can say to yourself, here's a list of the things that I worry about, and I'm going to worry about that thing tomorrow at 3 p.m, or tomorrow evening at 7 p.m, I'll worry about that one. You've given yourself permission to keep it real, so you're not ignoring it or hiding your worries, but you're not doing it in bed.
So obviously getting more sleep and getting a better quality of sleep is helpful. Is there anything else that we can do if we're feeling fatigued during the day?
If feeling fatigued, it's worth looking at what's going on, not just in your mind, but also in your body. Are you eating right? Are you having too much salt? Is there too much fat? Is there too much sugar? Are you getting enough hydration? How much water do you drink during the day? Water is absolutely vital for our body to function properly, for our brain to function properly. Most of us is water. That's what we're made up, particularly our brain. And if we're not hydrating properly during the day, we are going to feel tired. We are going to feel fatigued. It's really worth monitoring your hydration levels and your salt levels as well, because that changes your hydration levels. Look at your diet and look at your hydration and see how that's affecting you.
Okay, that's interesting because we've actually done a podcast in the past about nutrition and hydration. So if you haven't listened to that yet, I'd recommend you go back and find that. Well, I'd like to thank you again, Richard, for your time. As always, it's been really interesting and illuminating, and we've learned some new things. So thanks.
It's been lovely seeing you. Take care, Chris.
Right, we've spoken to Richard and he's had some great points. We're going to speak to a lady called Sam. So Sam works with a lot of people who have trouble sleeping. So she's a real expert in terms of practical ways that you can change your environment and give yourself the best opportunity of sleeping well. Hi Sam, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for your time today.
That's a pleasure.
Sam, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Sam Coleshaw Robinson and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. My business is called What's the Alternative Therapy, and I specialise in helping people who struggle with sleep and also weight loss, because those two issues are quite intertwined really.
Coming into this podcast, I didn't realise there was such a connection between sleep and weight. So for those of us wishing to lose some weight, looking at your sleep patterns and making improvements should go a long way to helping. Can I ask, do you think people generally underestimate the importance of sleep?
Yes, I do. I mean, there's this sort of glib thing that everybody thinks of. Have a bad night's sleep, you get in a bad mood, you're tired and grumpy, and sometimes you might notice you get a bit hungry if you haven't slept as well, because you've got low energy, and it actually if in a prolonged space of time, if you're getting a prolonged period of sleep deprivation, then it can actually cause permanent physical damage to your body, which I don't think people realise that. You're at a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, you're at a higher risk of heart disease, and those are huge things for your health. And also you can get a low mood, which can lead to depression and anxiety. So they're all really important aspects to your health.
So sleep should be way up there along with diet and exercise when reviewing your lifestyle in terms of health and well-being. Sam, how did you become an expert on sleep?
Usually with every client that I see, I gather quite a lot of information, as you can imagine. And one of the questions that I always ask, whatever clients come to see me for, whatever issue it is, I always ask about their sleep. And it's quite telling, really. If people aren't sleeping well, it's quite interesting the sort of effect it has on people. So as I've sort of progressed, becoming more of a specialist with weight loss, even I've noticed with the, relatively small number of clients that I see, a lot of overweight clients don't sleep. And so I've made it my job to research into all that and find out about the best ways to help with it, because it helps people reduce their weight as well. So it's kind of coincidental.
And you've had great success, haven't you, helping people who have struggled with their sleep? I know that you've been on TV a couple of times recently talking about some of your methods that you use and the importance of sleep.
Yeah, I've had a good deal of success with it because my GP sends me quite a few clients. I tend to be the last resort though. Sometimes people have tried drugs, they've been to the sleep clinic and all that kind of thing. Then they think, I'll give hypnotherapy a try. But often with a combination of insomnia, cognitive behavioural therapy, sleep hygiene and hypnotherapy, we can actually solve the problem, even if people have had 20 years of very, very little sleep, just a few hours a night.
Oh yeah, so sleep hygiene. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because I understand that anybody could improve their sleep further.
The sleep hygiene is not all about clean sheets and things like that. There's quite a few environmental factors that if you want to give yourself the best chance of sleeping, they're worth looking at. Things like that we do with children, we get them into a routine, don't we? And sometimes if you're finding it difficult to sleep, getting yourself back into a routine can really help. So you have a kind of ritual to wind down for the last hour so that you're not manically rushing around, you're sort of taking things slower. You make your bedroom very peaceful. So one thing is taking out TVs, computers, phones, because the bright light, especially the blue light from them, can stimulate your brain. So your brain is thinking, well, it's not time for bed yet. Gone are the days when the sun set and we used to go to sleep. So things like avoiding caffeine. Some people are genetically sensitive to caffeine. So avoiding it completely is better for some people. Some medications have got caffeine in them as well. The sleep hygiene are tips like that. But the other thing is, you've probably come across the scenario where you've been trying to get to sleep, and trying is the word. Then it gets to about 6 o'clock and you just think, and just give up. And that is when you fall asleep. It's when you've stopped fighting. So the more you try to sleep and you're struggling, it's almost if you have a rope, you're pulling and it makes the energy stronger, the fact that you're not sleeping. And then when you finally let go of that rope, then you can drop off. I used to say to my children when they were younger, don't worry if you don't sleep, just think to yourself, well, I'm having a rest and I'm lying in bed and it's fine. And then just that acceptance takes the pressure off and you can just allow yourself to fall asleep rather than trying to get to sleep. It's that kind of shift in the perspective, really.
Well, thanks, Sam. That's been really interesting. And again, thank you for your time. So in summary, it's pretty obvious that sleep is a fundamental human need. I certainly didn't realise just how serious the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation can be, and I didn't know there was such a strong link between sleep and weight. We've heard that to be more efficient when we are awake, we should ensure that we've had a good night's kip. If you're struggling with your sleep, ensure that in the hour before you go to bed, you create a routine of winding down. This can involve avoiding work, emails, and also the blue light given off by tech such as TVs, laptops, tablets and phones. Consider your diet, particularly your water intake during the day, and if you have any worries, write them down and then set dates and times for when you're going to think about each of them. There's also some more useful information on the NHS Choices website. Just look up NHS Sleep. And if you've not heard our other podcasts on alcohol and healthy eating, be sure to check them out too. As always, if you have any questions or comments, you can get us at hello@boostwellbeing.co.uk or you can call us on 0115 928 7889. Right, so that's me done. Until next time, I wish you sweet dreams.